Alright everybody, this is a quick slide lecture on our portrait project for this week, which is the Odilon Redon inspired pastel project. Alright, so for this project I'm going to be using some colored pastel paper, some Conte pencils, and some soft pastels. Not oil pastels, soft pastels. If you do not have these materials, you're welcome to kind of look at my thinking behind the techniques of this assignment and kind of try to replicate them in whichever medium you choose to do this week, okay? So first, I'm going to give you, just for fun, and because I love art history, just a little bit of background information on Odilon Redon. So he is a French artist, and he is a 19th century artist and known as a symbolist painter, right? Now, this here appears to be an oil painting, but he is very well known for his pastel drawings, and his prints. He was a printmaker as well, right? So symbolism, I like it. I'm a romanticist myself. I really like 19th century, the romanticists, the sublime landscape painters, all these kind of things. You know, the pre-Raphaelites. I have a soft spot for them, so you can see why I really love Odilon Redon, but not just because of the subject matter. I just really love the visuals of this such soft dreaminess that I think really enhances the symbolist nature of the subject matter he uses as well. Right? So here is a quote from Redon. He describes his work as ambiguous and undefinable. He says, "My drawings inspire and are not to be defined. They place us, as does music, in the ambiguous realm of the undetermined." I mean, that quote in itself is so romantic, right? Here's a pastel drawing of his. This one here is a print. I think it's an aquatint etching or of some sort. All right, so Redon's work represents an exploration of his internal feelings and psyche. This is a quote on the Odilon Redon website, which I have a link to later. One of the things that really strikes me about his pastel work is the sense of place. So look at the background and all of these bright colors he puts in there, and they really upstage the subject matter in a way. And this reminds me of Asian landscape paintings and the concept of the landscape of the mind, right? So for me, I look at these backgrounds as a sort of symbolic representation of the inner mind, right? So for me, and I'm reading into this as well, but I feel like these backgrounds are so beautiful and so bright, and he uses them to sort of frame the figure or the portrait or whoever he's drawing, and to me they do have a symbolic importance. All right, here's a little snippet of a fun little quote from Redon diary journal. So I'll let you guys just kind of pause rather than me reading it all to you, and there's a link to his page on his biography if you would like to learn more about him. All right, so to our exercise for today, I'm looking at this piece close up. So it's about an expressive background, right? In kind of lighter values or brighter colors and higher chroma. And using that, we're going to put the skin tones in context. All right, so we can see here that we have this kind of tan paper, and we have this slightly darker tan or brown chalk or pastel, right? So you can see that he has some very beautiful details here on this portrait, but he's really just framing it. So you can see right here around the lips and the nose, he's really just putting this bright, thick layer of pastel around the face, right? We have all these somewhat abstract kind of starburst shapes on here, but I wouldn't call them abstract or non-representational too much, because to me they clearly look like flowers of some sort, right? But you can see just like how small the portrait of her is, and look at her gaze going off this way, and we have all of this space here, right? Now, that being said, depending on what size paper you have, and this goes for all portraits, I would not attempt to do the portrait smaller than your hand, all right? So from the base of your hand to the tip of your outstretched fingers, don't go any smaller than that. Go smaller than that and it will just be very difficult. So if you don't have a huge paper, you don't need to leave this much room. Like if you only have a 9x12 paper, I would, do, something like this. But you do want to have space for the background. You do want to have space to kind of play around with layering some of these pastels in here. Right? Here's another example of one of his pieces. So you can see we have some kind of tan paper. We have the figure. We have this tree that are drawn in somewhat dull tones, right? We don't have anything super bright or chromatic, but then you have the whole background. Look at these beautiful pops of turquoise on this plant in the front, and just these kind of layers of background and everything on here. All right, so moving on to just some more of these examples. You can see here we have, somewhat medium dark, nothing too dark, nothing too light on this face. And then just all of this expressive. Look at this composition here. This is so, I want to say non-traditional, right? You would never see like Raphael or somebody do something like this with a background. It's sort of, it's somewhat distracting, but if you think about it as a symbolist would, this is a, big, just kind of hunk of white and thick and pink and yellow, and it's kind of coming from his mind over, over to the left. And the left side of his head is illuminated just a little bit. Also, look at the beautiful, delicate shape of the contour of this ear is being framed by the screen. So putting these background colors around the portrait helps to put it into context, right? So a couple more examples here. These are portraits of people he knew. All right, and we're on to the supplies. All right, so I talked about this. I have a piece of pastel or charcoal paper, preferably a colored one. This example on the right here, you can see he did on blue paper, and he drew the person with a red or pink color of chalk. Right? Any paper will do. If you only have regular white drawing paper, you can use that, and you can try to put some sort of tone. Like if we look at this one, we have a little bit of a brown tone and a peach tone. You can just kind of try to tone the, as you're drawing, instead of using the paper tone, right? Charcoal pencil or Conte pencil for sketching the portrait. The chalk pastels, the soft pastels, they're big and thick and hunky. They're not really sharpenable to the extent that a Conte pencil is. You can use a charcoal pencil if you don't have a Conte. Or, you can just use the, go ahead and use the soft pastel if that's what you have. I like to use a soft watercolor brush to kind of blend it. You'll see that in my demo part of this video. All right, and then, like I mentioned, you could use any medium if you wish. Oil paint, watercolors, anything you want, and try to follow along. For example, if you just look at the concept of this and how the background is used here, right? You have this background being used with these colors to kind of frame and put these colors into context. Yeah, you're welcome to try this with anything. All right, so first step is to sketch the portrait with dull, earthy type colors. Now I say earthy, this is a red, this is pretty bright, but here was my first step of doing this. All right, so I used a piece of gray paper, and I used Conte pencils in the color of sanguine and sepia. Now I'm going to talk about this in my video lecture, my demo, I'm going to talk about this in my demo. I feel like I maybe went into autopilot as an oil painter by trade, and maybe put a little bit too much darkness on here and too much kind of detail. Like this, you can see there's not a lot of darkness in here, and that's what gives Redon's work a little bit more of that dreamy symbolist kind of quality, because these people are so mysterious. And here, so what I'm saying is you all can learn from my mistakes. And by the way, there's nothing wrong if you want to be inspired by Redon and take it to your own place, which is what I did here, not on purpose, but just in retrospect. When I do this demo for my in-person class today, I'm going to avoid going so dark, right? I'm going to give it more of that dreamy look. All right. By the way, this is the reference photo that I used. I just saw a quote and this photo of Virginia Woolf on my Facebook feed today, and I was struck by the urge to draw her. Another reason I chose this photo is because looking at Redon's pieces, a lot of his are in the profile view. And look at how the contour of the nose and the lips and the chin are framed by that bright background. So that's why when I saw this, I was like, this will work perfectly. Now, again, Redon also did like this one, where they're looking straight ahead. But, something like, I just saw this and I wanted to draw her. All right, so you can use whoever you want. This is a good one for black and white photos, since we're not doing a full color painting, like we're not doing an oil painting or a full color. This is a little bit more, it's more symbolist in nature. So if you have a photo of someone in black and white and don't know which project to use it for, this would be the good project to use it for. All right, step 2 is go wild and crazy with the background colors. All right, so I'm not too much of a pastel user myself. They're just so messy, and that's something, like, I had to bring the vacuum into my room and vacuum just the dust, this crumbly pigment falling everywhere, all over the place. That's why I don't use pastels too often, but they are very fun to use, and they're just pure pigment and so bright, right? So you can see how I have this kind of drawing of her face in these kind of dull colors, and I am framing it around the side with these pastels. All right, and step 2 continued. Here are some of my thoughts I'm going to share with you after I did this. All right, so I started with a layer of some white around the face and layered some light colors on top. So in retrospect, I would have used more of a planned out palette instead of grabbing every whatever color that struck me. All right, so I think that if you have all of these colors, it can be a little chaotic. Now, I'm going to go way back here to this one. Right, so I think we have an overall pink and blue kind of theme here. Right, yes, we veer off to get little pops of yellow here and there, but especially around here, the yellow's kind of blended in with pink, making a sort of orange salmon color. Yes, we veer off into this bright red over here, right? So I'm going to say blue and orange, and yes, a little bit of wiggle room back and forth on the color wheel from each of these. So I could call this a sort of complementary color palette, right? You have your blue and your orange, those are complementary colors, aka opposite each other on the color wheel. And it's a little bit more controlled this way than having every color from your box, like I kind of started with, and then when I realized it was out of control, I kind of pushed it back towards the blue and orange. So anyways, less wild and less crazy is what I recommend. All right. I also really enjoyed Redon's round flower reminiscent motifs, so I started kind of putting some in here as well. I'm gonna skip way back again. Here, you can see this one has a crazy, dragon, crocodile, seahorse guy, which is so random and I love him. So really just go wild. But you can see some of these kind of background kind of motifs going in and out of the figure, kind of up here. Here we have a lot of these kind of weird kind of floral motifs in there. We have all of these behind her as well. All right. All right, and then, another thing is I didn't really consider this to be finished. I know that some people with pastels like to take a razor blade or just take that dust and sprinkle it all over here, and then get a paper and press it down on top, and then rub the back of the paper to get that kind of dust in there. And that's maybe how you would get some of these motifs around here. I mean, this could be just like scribbling around there, but getting these beautiful kind of layers of pastels. I simply had to move on from this one at this point in time. I went back in with this one and decided, all of this yellow in the background, hey, what would it look like if I popped a little bit of highlights on her face here and there? So that made her even further, a little bit more 3D, a little bit more chiaroscuro, light and shadow, versus some of these that are a little bit more flat and ghostly and mystical, right? So whichever you go with, so like I mentioned, for my next one, I'm going to practice more restraint and keep it lighter and not put so many darks in here. Yes, those darks pop her eye out, pop her mouth out. I used this kind of orangey color called Sanguine. I used this kind of darker brownish color called Sepia, and I even popped in a tiny bit of black here and there. But anyhow, and then, I went and took some of these background colors, these blues, and kind of put it on the hair in there as well. All right, so anyways, I had a whole lot of fun with this, and I hope you do too. So again, you can kind of use this kind of formula of lighter kind of background. Lighter background. You can use this formula of more of a pale, earthy color, low-key portrait, and then framing the portrait with some brighter, high-key colors, and really placing that portrait into context. Preferably with chalk, but if you don't, or soft pastel, but if you don't have it, you can use anything, any medium you have. You can try to do what I did not achieve, which is to stick more closely to how Redon approaches this. Or you can take it off in your own direction, like use it as a starting point and make your own piece. So I am excited to see what all of you do.